She arrived at the courthouse carrying her newborn daughter close to her chest, one hand gripping the divorce papers, the other holding onto the last shreds of dignity her husband had not yet managed to strip away. Everyone expected tears. Everyone expected her to beg. But Madison Carter walked into the room calm, silent, and utterly composed in a way that made the air feel heavier. Across the room sat her billionaire husband, Damian Carter, smiling beside his glamorous lover like a man who had already won. His mother, Vivian Carter, sat just behind him, dressed like royalty and whispering poison into his ear. "Throw her out," she said. "A woman with a baby and no money has no power here." Damian laughed, the sound echoing with arrogance. In front of lawyers, executives, family members, and his mistress, he told Madison she was finished. He declared the house was no longer hers. The cars were no longer hers. Even their child, he hinted with cold detachment, would grow up knowing he had chosen better. Then, with one dismissive wave of his hand, he ordered security to remove his own wife and newborn from the room. What Damian did not know was this. Just days earlier, while his family celebrated his impending freedom, Madison had signed one document that changed everything. The company his family had fought so desperately to save. The empire his father built and his mother revered like a deity had been secretly acquired. The new owner was the very woman they had just humiliated. So Madison did not scream. She did not fight. She simply looked at Damian, then at his mother, then at the mistress wearing her old wedding diamonds. When she finally spoke, the entire room froze. Because the woman they had tried to cast out with nothing but a newborn in her arms had not come to lose her marriage. She had come to claim their kingdom. The courtroom grew so quiet that Madison could hear the soft, steady breaths of her daughter against her chest. Little Ava stirred beneath the white blanket, her tiny fingers curling around the edge of Madison's blouse, as if even the infant sensed the monumental shift unfolding around them. Damian stared at her as though he had misheard. His smile remained on his face, but it now looked stiff and foolish. Beside him, Sabrina Monroe, the woman he had paraded into the courthouse as his future, slowly lowered her phone. She had been recording, hoping to capture Madison's humiliation for her private entertainment. Now the camera lens trembled in her manicured hand. Vivian Carter sat bolt upright, her pearl necklace resting against her throat like a symbol of a dynasty she had believed untouchable. For years she had taught everyone around her that the Carter name could not be challenged. She had trained servants to bow, executives to fear her, relatives to obey, and her son to view women as either useful or disposable. Madison had been useful when she stayed quiet. She had become disposable the moment she became inconvenient. And now she was dangerous, because she had stopped explaining herself altogether. "What did you say?" Damian asked, his voice low. Madison adjusted Ava gently, careful not to wake her fully. That small, deliberate movement angered him more than shouting ever could. It was too calm, too controlled, too much like a woman who already knew where every knife in the room was hidden and had removed the sharpest one. "I did not come here to lose my marriage," Madison replied. "I came here to collect what belongs to me." Damian laughed again, but this time no one joined him. His lawyer, Mr. Langford, a narrow-faced man with silver glasses and a reputation for dismantling women in divorce settlements, leaned toward him with a frown. "Mr. Carter, perhaps we should pause for a moment." Damian snapped his eyes toward him. "Pause for what?" Madison's own attorney, Grace Whitmore, opened a black folder and slid a stack of documents across the table. Her expression did not change. Grace had been waiting for this moment ever since Madison walked into her office carrying a newborn, a sealed envelope, and a secret capable of bringing one of the state's richest families to its knees. "Your Honor," Grace said, before Mr. Carter continues making threats about property he no longer controls. We need to enter updated ownership documentation into the record. The judge, who had been watching with growing irritation, adjusted his glasses. Updated ownership documentation? Yes, Your Honor. Damien leaned back with a smirk, trying to recover his arrogance. This is ridiculous. Madison has nothing. She signed a prenuptial agreement. Madison looked at him, then really looked at him, and for a moment she saw the man he had been before the Carter fortune swallowed him whole. She remembered Damien standing under the weak yellow light of a gas station canopy during a storm, soaked through because he had given her his jacket. Back then he had not yet become the golden prince of Carter Global Holdings. He had been just a man with tired eyes and impossible dreams, telling her he wanted to build something that would outlive his father's mistakes. I don't want to be like them, he had told her that night, rainwater dripping from his hair. My mother thinks love is weakness. My father thinks loyalty is something you can buy. I want to be different. With you, Madison, I think I can be. She had believed him. That was the first mistake love had dressed up as something noble. When Damien's father died and the empire passed into his hands, Vivian made certain the old poison did not die with her husband. She moved through the mansion like a shadow in silk, whispering to Damien at breakfast, correcting him at board meetings, reminding him that sentiment had nearly ruined his father. Your wife is sweet, Vivian would say with a smile that never warmed her eyes. But sweetness does not protect empires. At first, Damien defended Madison. He held her hand under dinner tables when Vivian made sharp comments. He kissed her forehead before meetings. He told her not to worry when Sabrina Monroe began appearing more often in the executive wing, laughing too loudly at his jokes, touching his sleeve too comfortably, praising his vision in ways Madison recognized as performance. But something changed, slowly enough that Madison blamed herself for noticing. The hand under the table disappeared. The forehead kisses became rushed. The late meetings grew later still. And one evening, months before Ava was born, Madison stood in the hallway outside Damien's study and heard Vivian say, Sabrina understands your world. Madison only understands your heart. One of those things can make you stronger. The other will make you weak. Madison waited for Damien to object. He did not. That silence had been a prophecy. Now in the courtroom, Grace tapped the first document. Carter Global Holdings has been under severe private debt restructuring for some time. Several key subsidiaries were pledged as collateral. Recently, those debt instruments and controlling shares were acquired by Whitestone Meridian Capital. Damien frowned. What does that have to do with her? Grace turned another page. The judge leaned forward. Madison said nothing. Grace continued. Whitestone Meridian Capital is a privately held acquisition firm. Its controlling owner is Madison Carter. Sabrina made a small, choked sound. Damien's face drained of color. Vivian shot to her feet so fast her chair scraped loudly against the floor. That is a lie. Grace did not even glance at her. Sit down, Mrs. Carter. How dare you speak to me that way? The judge's voice cut across the room. Mrs. Carter, sit down or leave my courtroom. Vivian sat, but her hands trembled in her lap. Damien grabbed the documents from his lawyer before Mr. Langford could stop him. His eyes moved across the pages too quickly at first, searching for a mistake, a forged signature, a missing seal, any crack in the impossible truth. But the more he read, the paler he became. Madison watched him discover her not the wife he ignored, not the woman he abandoned, not the mother he tried to shame, but the woman he had never bothered to truly know before she married Damien Carter. Madison Reed had grown up in a narrow brick house at the edge of Baltimore, where the heater rattled in winter and her mother counted grocery money twice before entering the store. Her father, Thomas Reed, had worn cheap suits and worked as an accountant for companies that never put his name on office doors. He was quiet, careful, and brilliant in the way poor men often had to be brilliant simply to survive. He taught Madison numbers before he taught her fairy tales. When people want to hide the truth, he would say, sliding old financial statements across the kitchen table, they bury it in numbers. Learn to read them, and nobody can lie to you for long. Madison learned. From a young age, she could find missing money in a spreadsheet faster than her teachers could grade homework. She earned scholarships, awards, and internship offers from firms that claimed to admire her talent while quietly wondering if she would fit their culture. She built the foundation of Whitestone Meridian under a mentor's name because investors listened more attentively when they believed the genius behind the strategy belonged to a gray-haired man in a navy suit. That mentor was Charles Whitmore, Grace's father. Charles had been her father's old friend, a retired mergers and acquisitions expert who owed Thomas Reed a favor no amount of money could repay. When Madison's father fell ill, Charles visited their small house every week with soup, legal pads, and stories about boardrooms where rich men lost everything because they underestimated quiet people. Power, Charles told Madison once while her father slept in the next room, is not always loud. Sometimes power sits in the corner, takes notes, and buys the building while everyone else fights over the furniture. Madison never forgot. When her father died, he left her 3 things: his watch, a letter, and a warning. The watch was old and scratched. The letter said he was proud of her. The warning was written on the back of a faded Carter Global invoice from years earlier. Do not trust the Carter family with your heart or your money. At the time, Madison thought grief had made him dramatic. Years later, after she fell in love with Damien, she almost threw the warning away. Almost. Instead, she folded it and placed it inside a locked drawer, telling herself the past was not always a map, but sometimes it was dot in the courtroom. Damien looked up slowly. You own Whitestone? Madison's face did not move. Yes. You never asked what I did when you decided I was only your wife. That's impossible, Sabrina said, her voice thin. I searched her. Everyone knows she came from nothing. Madison looked at her. You searched the name Madison Carter. You should have searched Madison Reed. Sabrina's cheeks flushed. It was true. She had searched Madison's old social media pages, charity photos, wedding announcements, anything that could make her feel superior. She found a scholarship girl with a dead father and a modest mother. She found no scandal, no family fortune, no society connections. She mistook privacy for emptiness. Vivian had made the same mistake. For years she called Madison simple in rooms where she thought Madison could not hear. Simple taste, simple background, simple mind. She once told a dinner guest that Madison was beautiful in a harmless way, and the table laughed politely while Madison refilled her water glass and memorized the face of every person who smiled. Damien had heard that too. He had not defended her then either. The first real fracture came on the night of the Carter Foundation Gala. Madison was several months pregnant and wearing a blue gown Damien had chosen because he said it made her look soft. Sabrina arrived in silver, escorted by no one, welcomed by everyone. Vivian placed Sabrina at Damien's right hand and Madison 3 seats down beside an elderly donor who asked twice if she was part of the catering committee. When Madison found Damien on the balcony later, Sabrina's hand was on his chest. He stepped back quickly, but not quickly enough. Madison remembered the city lights behind him, bright and cold. She remembered the way his face twisted, first with guilt, then with annoyance, as if her pain had interrupted something important. It's not what you think, he said. What do I think? He had no answer. That night Madison slept in the nursery she had just finished decorating. She sat beneath the painted clouds on the ceiling, one hand on her belly, and whispered to her unborn child, I hope you never have to beg someone to choose you. The next morning she called Charles Whitmore. I need you to look into Carter Global's debt structure, she said. Charles was quiet for a long moment. Madison, are you sure? No, she said. That is why I need facts. Facts arrived like storms. Carter Global was not the fortress it pretended to be. Damien's father had expanded too quickly, borrowed too heavily, and hidden losses inside subsidiaries with names so ordinary nobody wanted to examine them closely. Damien had inherited a palace with termites in the walls. Vivian knew. Senior executives knew. The banks knew. But the public's only yachts, galas, magazine covers, and assumed gold could not rust. Madison began watching. She watched Damien take calls in another room. She watched Vivian invite private bankers to lunch. She watched Sabrina whisper confidence into Damien's ear while quietly building her own escape routes. And Madison watched a company's debt become available piece by piece through channels Damien never imagined she could access. Every insult became information. Every locked door taught her where to look for the key. Every time Damien dismissed her as emotional, she became more precise. Still, part of her hoped she would never need to use what she knew. That hope died one evening when Damien came home late smelling of Sabrina's perfume and expensive whiskey. Madison was in the kitchen barefoot, drinking water because the baby had been restless for hours. He stopped when he saw her, irritation flashing across his face. You're still awake. So are you. He loosened his tie. Don't start. Madison looked at him, really looked, and saw not the man from the gas station, not the dreamer in the rain, but Vivian's son, polished, proud, hollow in the places love used to live. Are you in love with her? She asked. He laughed under his breath. You're pregnant and emotional. Answer me. His eyes hardened. Sabrina doesn't make everything feel like a trial. The words were not shouted. That made them worse. Madison set the glass down carefully. And what do I make things feel like? Small, he said. And the moment he said it, something in his face changed, as if he knew he had opened a door that could never close. But pride pushed him through it. You make me feel small, Madison. Like I'm always disappointing you. Sabrina believes in me. Madison nodded slowly. No, Damien. Sabrina believes in what she thinks you own. He stepped closer. You know nothing about my world. Madison almost smiled, not because it was funny, but because fate had a cruel sense of timing. Behind him, through the kitchen window, lightning flashed across the sky. Not long after, he sent divorce papers. Ava was born soon afterward. Damien did not come to the hospital until the next morning. He arrived with Vivian, who carried flowers like an obligation and wore white as if attending the birth of her granddaughter was a business ceremony. Sabrina waited downstairs in the car. Madison knew because one of the nurses mentioned the woman in the black Bentley who kept asking how long Mr. Carter would be. Damien held Ava for less than 2 minutes. She's small, he said. She's perfect. Madison replied. Vivian looked at the baby and sighed. Well, at least she has the Carter eyes. Madison's mother, Diane, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, stood up. Madison caught her wrist before she could speak. Diane had spent her life swallowing disrespect to keep peace in rooms that did not deserve it. But that day, looking at Vivian Carter near her granddaughter, even Diane nearly broke. After Damien left, Diane sat beside Madison's bed and cried silently. Madison did not. She watched the door close behind her husband and remembered her father's warning. Then she picked up her phone and sent Charles Whitmore one message. Move forward. By the time Damien's lawyers scheduled the courthouse meeting, the acquisition was already in motion. Whitestone Meridian did not attack Carter Global from the front. It came through debt, distressed assets, voting rights, and emergency liquidity agreements. Madison signed the final controlling documents in the early hours of the morning while Ava slept in a bassinet beside her. Grace Whitmore was there, hair pulled back, sleeves rolled up, eyes red from lack of sleep. Charles was there too, older now, walking with a cane, but smiling like a man who had just watched justice put on a tailored suit. Once this is signed, Grace warned, there is no soft version of what happens next. Madison looked at Ava. He already chose the hard version. She signed. And somewhere across the city, Damien Carter raised champagne with Sabrina and Vivian, believing Madison was finished, now in the courtroom. That belief died in front of everyone. Damien stood abruptly. This is fraud. Grace folded her hands. No, Mr. Carter, this is business. My family would never approve this. Your family lost the right to approve anything when they defaulted on the obligations tied to their controlling assets. Vivian's voice shook with rage. You planned this. Madison finally turned to her. No, Vivian. You planned it. You taught your son that I was powerless. You told him to throw me out. I simply allowed you to speak loudly enough for the whole room to hear what kind of family you are. The words landed like shattering glass. Damien's eyes flicked toward the executives seated at the back. Several were Carter Global board members who had come expecting to support him through an easy divorce. Madison had insisted through legal channels that relevant corporate witnesses be present because of property implications. Damien had thought it was a pathetic attempt to make herself seem important. Now those same executives avoided his eyes. One of them, Marcus Hale, the company's chief financial officer, looked physically ill. He had known the company was vulnerable. He had not known the buyer was Madison. He also knew what Madison now controlled: contracts, voting authority, emergency board powers, and the ability to remove any executive who had helped conceal financial rot. Madison looked at Marcus for half a second. He understood. His career began trembling before his body did. The judge cleared his throat. Mr. Langford, I suggest you confer with your client. But Damien was no longer listening to legal advice. Pride had closed its hands around his throat. He pointed at Madison. You think this makes you powerful? You think buying debt makes you one of us? One of you? Madison asked softly. Yes, Vivian snapped. You may have stolen your way into papers and signatures, but blood is blood. You're not a Carter. Madison smiled then. It was small, calm, and devastating. Thank God. Sabrina stood, panic breaking through her polished mask. Damien, say something. Tell them this can be reversed. Damien turned to his lawyer. Can it? Mr. Langford removed his glasses. That was answer enough. Madison shifted Ava once more and rose to her feet. I have no interest in dragging this divorce out. I will keep what is legally mine. You will keep your personal belongings. Carter Global will be restructured immediately. Vivian will vacate her advisory office by the end of the week. Sabrina Monroe is banned from all Carter Global properties effective today. Sabrina gasped. You can't do that. Madison looked at her old wedding diamonds resting against Sabrina's collarbone. I can do much more than that. Be grateful I am starting there. Damien's face twisted. You don't get to humiliate me. Madison looked around the courtroom, then back at him. Damien, I did not bring your lover to my divorce. I did not let my mother insult the mother of my child. I did not order security to remove a newborn from a room. You built this humiliation yourself. I only turned on the lights. For 1 second, something human flickered in Damien's eyes. Shame, perhaps, or memory. Madison wondered if he too remembered the gas station, the rain, the man who once swore he would never become his parents. But the flicker passed. His pride survived what his love had not. This isn't over, he said. Madison nodded. No, it is not. Outside the courthouse, cameras waited. Damien had arranged them. He wanted the world to see him walking out victorious with Sabrina at his side and Madison behind him, defeated, poor, and erased. Vivian had approved the plan. Sabrina had chosen her outfit for it. They expected a performance. They got one. The courthouse doors opened and Madison stepped out first. Sunlight touched her face. Ava slept peacefully against her chest. Grace walked beside her, carrying the black folder that had just detonated an empire. Behind them came Damien, pale and furious. Sabrina with mascara gathering at the corners of her eyes. Vivian gripping her handbag so tightly her knuckles turned white. Reporters surged forward. Mrs. Carter, is it true you acquired Carter Global? Mr. Carter, did you know your wife owned Whitestone Meridian? Mrs. Carter, what happens to the family business now? Damien tried to step in front of Madison, but security moved, not courthouse security, not Carter's security, but Whitestone Meridian's private protection team. They formed a respectful line around Madison and Ava. Another prophecy fulfilled months earlier. When Madison still lived in the Carter mansion, she had passed the security office and overheard one guard laughing. Mrs. Carter, he said to another, she doesn't need protection. She needs permission. The guard was not employed there anymore. Madison stopped at the top of the steps. Microphones lifted toward her like metal flowers. She had not planned to speak, but then Ava made a tiny sound in her sleep. And Madison thought of all the rooms her daughter would one day enter, rooms where people might judge her by her softness, her last name, her silence, her kindness. Rooms where someone might mistake patience for weakness. Madison looked directly into the cameras. Carter Global will continue operating, she said. Employees will be protected. Mismanagement will not. The company is entering a new era of accountability, and every person who used power to harm others will answer for it, a reporter shouted. And your marriage? Madison's gaze moved briefly to Damien. My marriage ended when my husband confused loyalty with weakness. Damien flinched. Vivian stepped forward, unable to help herself. This is a private family matter. Madison turned. It stopped being private when you told your son to throw my newborn out of a courtroom. The cameras swung toward Vivian. For the first time in her life, Vivian Carter had no room powerful enough to hide inside. The clips spread everywhere. Financial networks were soon discussing the shocking acquisition. Carter Global's board requested an emergency meeting. By the next morning, Damien's phone had filled with messages from investors, partners, old friends, and enemies pretending to be concerned. Sabrina stayed at his penthouse that night, but she did not touch him. She paced near the windows, still wearing the diamonds, searching online for any loophole, any rumor, any sign that Madison's ownership could collapse. This doesn't make sense, she kept saying. Women like her don't just own companies like that. Damien sat in the dark with a glass he had not tasted. Women like her. That phrase crawled under his skin because he had believed it too. He remembered Madison in their first apartment, long before the mansion, sitting cross-legged on the floor with spreadsheets open across 3 monitors. He used to joke that she looked like she was planning to overthrow a country. She would smile without looking up and say, "Not a country." He had thought it was a joke. He remembered her asking questions during dinner with his father. Sharp questions about acquisition debt and voting structures. His father had stared at her for a moment too long, then said, "You understand finance." Madison had replied, "Enough." Afterward, Damien had teased her for making his father uncomfortable. She said, "Powerful men are only uncomfortable when they sense someone can read the fine print." He had kissed her then, proud of her. When had pride become resentment? Damien did not know, or maybe he did, but knowing would require honesty. And honesty was a room he had avoided for years. In the early hours of the morning, Sabrina finally said what fear had been building inside her all night. "What happens to me?" Damien looked up. "What?" "My brand deals, my invitations, my place on the charity board, the apartment you promised. If she controls the company, what happens to me?" Something ugly and clear moved through Damien's chest. Madison had been right. Sabrina did not ask what happened to him. She asked what happened to herself.by the following week. Madison entered Carter Global headquarters not as Damien's wife, not as Vivian's disappointment, not as the woman staff once pitied when Sabrina swept through the lobby beside Damien. She entered as chairwoman. The lobby changed before she said a word. Receptionists stood straighter. Executives gathered near elevators with the terrified posture of people who had spent years laughing at the wrong woman. Security opened the private executive gate for her. The same polished marble floors that once carried her quietly behind Damien now reflected her steps alone. Ava was not with her. Madison had left her safely at home with Diane, who kissed her forehead and whispered, "Your father would have loved this part." Madison had smiled. "He warned me about this part." At the top floor, the boardroom waited. Vivian was already inside, seated at the far end of the table as if the chair still belonged to her. Damien stood near the window. Sabrina was absent. The building access ban had worked. Marcus Hale sat with two legal advisors, sweating through his collar. Madison entered with Grace, Charles, and a restructuring team. No one spoke. Madison took the chair at the head of the table. Vivian's eyes burned. "That seat belonged to my husband." Madison placed her folder on the table. "And then to your son. And now to me." "That is how ownership works," Damien muttered. "You're enjoying this." Madison looked at him. "No, I enjoyed loving you. I enjoyed believing you. I enjoyed building a nursery for our daughter while hoping her father would come home as the man he promised to be. This part, Damien, I earned." The board members lowered their eyes. Madison opened the meeting with numbers. Not emotion, not revenge numbers. She exposed the hidden debt, the wasteful spending, the executive bonuses paid while departments were quietly cut, the luxury retreats disguised as strategic planning, the contracts awarded to Vivian's friends, the consulting payments routed to Sabrina's lifestyle company for services nobody could prove were performed. Sabrina's name on the screen turned Damien's face gray. Madison had not known about that at first. She found it not long after giving birth. Sitting in bed with Eva asleep beside her, she discovered a shell company, a monthly fee, a signature from Damien authorizing payment. Not only betrayal financed betrayal. Vivian tried to interrupt. Those arrangements were standard. Madison clicked to the next slide. No, they were theft disguised as arrogance. Marcus Hale whispered. "Madison, Chairwoman Carter." Grace corrected gently. Marcus swallowed. "Chairwoman Carter, I was under instruction." Madison looked at him. So was everyone who ever chose wrong and wanted pity afterward. By the end of the meeting, 3 executives had resigned. 2 were placed under investigation. Vivian's advisory position was terminated. Damien was removed from operational control pending review. The board voted under the weight of documents they could not deny. Vivian did not shout when it ended. That would have given Madison the satisfaction of open defeat. Instead, she approached Madison slowly after everyone else had begun leaving. "You think this makes you safe?" Vivian asked. Madison closed her folder. "No, it makes me prepared. You have no idea what families like mine survive." Madison stepped closer, her voice quiet enough that only Vivian could hear. "And you have no idea what women like me remember." For the first time, Vivian looked afraid. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough. In the weeks that followed, the Carter name continued collapsing in public while the company itself began to heal. Madison kept the employees. She froze unnecessary executive luxuries. She sold 3 private jets and redirected funds into operational stabilization. She met with department heads Damien had ignored. She walked factory floors, visited regional offices, and listened more than she spoke. People began telling stories. The chairwoman remembered names. The chairwoman answered emails. The chairwoman carried no entourage unless necessary. The chairwoman had once been laughed at by the same people now begging to keep their jobs. Madison did not humiliate everyone who had underestimated her, only the ones who had harmed others while doing it. That made her more frightening. Damien watched from a distance as the company's stock stabilized and then rose. Reporters who once called Madison the abandoned wife began calling her the architect behind the Carter rescue. Business magazines requested interviews. Former investors returned. Employees posted anonymous stories about fair severance reversals, restored benefits, and corrupt managers removed. Damien should have felt relief. Instead, he felt replaced. One evening, he arrived at Madison's new home unannounced. It was not a mansion, not by Carter standards. It was large, elegant, and private, with warm lights in the windows and a garden beginning to bloom. The kind of home Madison would choose, beautiful without begging anyone to notice. Diane answered the door with Ava in her arms. Her face hardened. No, Damien looked at his daughter. She was awake, staring at him with wide Carter eyes, as Vivian had once said. But now Damien saw Madison too, her calm, her softness, her terrifying future. I need to speak to Madison, he said. Diane almost closed the door, but Madison appeared behind her. It's okay, Mom. Diane gave Damien a look that promised she had not forgiven him on earth or in heaven, then carried Ava back inside. Madison stepped onto the porch and closed the door behind her. Damien had rehearsed words in the car: apologies, explanations, accusations disguised as apologies. But standing before her, he realized every sentence sounded like a man trying to recover access, not love. You should have told me, he said finally. Madison's expression did not change. That is what you came to say. I was your husband. You were my husband when you brought your mistress to our divorce. He looked away. The night smelled like rain. For a painful second he remembered the gas station again. A younger Madison laughing as thunder cracked overhead. A younger Damien swearing he would never hurt her. I lost myself, he said. Madison's eyes softened, but only slightly. No, Damien, you chose yourself. There is a difference. I want to see Ava. You will. Through the custody schedule our attorneys arrange. His jaw tightened. You don't trust me. I trust patterns. That's not fair. Madison looked at him with quiet disbelief. Fair? I gave birth while your lover waited outside the hospital. I carried your child into a courtroom where your mother called us powerless. You let security reach for me while I held your newborn. Do not come to my door asking for fair, because consequences finally learned your address. Damien absorbed the words like blows. He had no right to argue. I loved you, he whispered. Madison's face changed then. Grief passed across it, not weakness, not longing, but grief for a version of them that had died slowly and without a funeral. I know, she said. That is what made it hurt. He looked at her, desperate. And now I love my daughter more than I miss her father. The door opened behind her. Ava began to cry inside, tiny and insistent. Madison turned immediately. That quick turn answered every question Damien had left. He was no longer the center of her life. He was barely a shadow at the edge of it. Not long after, Sabrina tried to sell a story. She contacted a tabloid claiming Madison had manipulated Damien, trapped him, stolen the company, and used motherhood for sympathy. The tabloid prepared to publish until Grace Whitmore sent a legal packet containing contracts, payment trails, text messages, and evidence of Sabrina's consulting payments from Carter Global accounts. The story never ran. Instead, another story appeared days later. Sabrina Monroe under investigation for fraudulent corporate payments. Sabrina called Damien 17 times. He answered once. You said you'd protect me, she cried. Damien sat alone in his penthouse, surrounded by furniture Sabrina had chosen, and silence Madison would have filled with warmth. I can't even protect myself, he said. She cursed him, then hung up. Damien did not call back. Vivian lasted longer. She refused to leave the Carter mansion even after the ownership transfer of certain company-held properties became clear. She hosted lunches. She wore diamonds. She told friends Madison's control was temporary. But invitations slowed. Calls went unanswered. Women who once feared her now pitied her publicly and mocked her privately. The final humiliation came at the annual Carter Foundation event. Madison attended as chairwoman and primary donor. She wore a modest emerald gown, carried herself like a woman no room could reduce, and spoke about ethical leadership, employee dignity, and rebuilding institutions that had confused wealth with worth. Vivian sat in the audience, not at the front table but several rows back. Damien watched from the side of the room. When Madison finished speaking, the applause was immediate and long. Vivian did not clap. Then the woman beside her did. Then the man behind her. Then everyone around her. Slowly, with cameras nearby and pride burning like acid in her throat, Vivian lifted her hands and clapped too. Madison saw. She gave no sign of triumph. That was worse. After the gala, Damien found his mother standing alone near a hallway lined with portraits of Carter men founders. Chairmen, builders, men who looked down from gold frames as if history belonged to them. Vivian stared at the empty space at the end of the wall where Damien's portrait had once been planned. "They will put her there," she said. Damien followed her gaze. He thought the idea would enrage him. Instead, it exhausted him. "She saved the company," he said. Vivian turned on him. "She stole it." "No," Damien said quietly. "We lost it before she arrived." Vivian's face tightened. "You sound like her for once." "Maybe that means I'm telling the truth." She slapped him. It was not hard enough to injure, but it cracked through the hallway like a family curse breaking open. Damien touched his cheek and looked at his mother. He saw, perhaps for the first time, the woman behind the pearls, not powerful, but terrified. Terrified of being ordinary. Terrified that without the Carter name, without the mansion, without obedience, she was only a person who had taught her son how to destroy his own happiness. "I became what you wanted," Damien said, "and it cost me everything." Vivian's lips trembled, but no apology came. Carter pride had trained her too well. In time, Madison's life did not become painless, but it became honest. Ava grew round-cheeked and bright-eyed. Diane moved closer. Grace became not only her attorney but her friend. Charles visited on Sundays and held Ava with the awkward tenderness of a man who had negotiated billion-dollar deals but feared dropping a baby, sometimes late at night. Madison still remembered Damien as he had been. Memory was cruel that way. It did not erase the good just because the bad had won. She remembered him dancing with her in their first kitchen, both of them laughing because they could not afford furniture yet but somehow felt rich. She remembered him reading business books aloud in bed and mispronouncing French company names until she corrected him. She remembered the gas station rain. But then Ava would stir, and Madison would return to the present. The past was a room she could visit. It was not a house she had to live in. When Ava turned 1, Madison hosted a small gathering in the garden. No cameras, no executives, no society guests, just family, close friends, sunlight, flowers, and a pink cake Ava mostly smashed with her hands. Damien came for an hour. He arrived without Vivian, without Sabrina, without arrogance. He brought a simple gift, a small music box shaped like a carousel. Madison recognized it immediately. Years earlier, before everything went wrong, they had passed an antique shop and seen the same music box in the window. Madison had said, "One day, if we have a daughter, I'd buy her something like that." Damien had remembered. That hurt more than if he had forgotten. Ava reached for him when he approached, curious but unsure. Madison allowed him to hold her. He did so carefully, reverently, as if finally understanding that a child was not an extension of his name but a life he had to earn his way into. She looks like you when she's judging people, Damien said softly. Madison almost smiled. Then she'll be fine. He looked at her. You are fine. No, Madison said, watching Ava tug at his collar. I am healing. That is better than pretending to be fine, Damien nodded. For once, he did not argue. Before leaving, he stopped near the garden gate. Madison. She turned. I'm sorry, he said. The words were simple. No excuse attached. No request hidden inside them. No demand for forgiveness. Madison studied him for a long moment. Then she said, I hope you become someone Ava can be proud of. It was not forgiveness. It was not punishment. It was a door left unlocked but not open. Damien accepted it like more mercy than he deserved. In time, people would still tell the story of the day Madison Carter walked into a courthouse with a newborn and walked out with an empire. They would exaggerate parts of it, soften others, turn her into a legend sharpened by gossip. Some would say she planned revenge from the beginning. Some would say she never loved Damien at all. Some would say she was cold. They would be wrong. Madison had loved deeply. That was why betrayal did not make her foolish. It made her awake. She had not wanted a kingdom. She had wanted a family. But when the family she married into tried to strip her of dignity, security, motherhood, and peace, they discovered too late that the quiet woman in the corner had been reading every number, every room, every silence. And she had learned the lesson her father left behind. When people want to hide the truth, they bury it in numbers. When people want to hide cruelty, they bury it in manners. And when powerful people think a woman has nothing left, they often fail to notice she is holding the one thing they cannot buy back. Proof. Madison kept her father's old watch on her desk at Carter Global beside a framed photo of Ava laughing in the garden. Visitors sometimes noticed it and wondered why a billionaire chairwoman wore such a plain, scratched thing. Madison never explained. She did not need to. Every tick reminded her that time reveals what pride tries to bury. Every tick reminded her that silence is not surrender. And every tick reminded her of the day Damien Carter laughed in a courtroom, believing he had thrown away a powerless woman only to discover he had handed his entire kingdom to its rightful queen.